And now we travel onwards to the continent of Africa. So please welcome 4 key talents from Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana, whose studios have really started to build and accelerate the games industry in Africa. Hello, welcome. So they actually said they were going to dance in. I don't know what happened to that. Was it last minute nerves? They were like, no, we'll be professional.
Protocol.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Very excited to introduce you. First off, here we have Hugo Obi. He is the founder of Milio Games in Nigeria. Beside him, Dorothy Arena, programs manager, also at Milio, and she also runs the Game Up Africa Talent Program. We're going to talk about that. From Kenya, we have Dennis Odera. He's a game producer at Usiku Games. And finally, Aram Tawia. He is CEO and co-founder of Ledi Arts based in Ghana. Welcome, welcome. So the last group, we did some fun facts. We thought we would switch it up a little bit for this group. So we're going to do some characteristics instead. So this is going to be characteristics that they believe about themselves and why that is. Hugo, what is it?
So I would say I'm a daredevil. And the reason why I would say that is because I once rode 400 kilometers on a bicycle east of Lagos. And if any of you has ever been to sub-Saharan Africa, the roads are treacherous. So that was like the bravest thing I've ever done, and I survived it. It was 2 days of riding. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a daredevil on our hands. Dorothy, how about you?
I am brave. I ride a 300 kilogram motorbike. I weigh less than 50 kg myself. So this is a very heavy bike. And on my first month with the bike, I did over 1,000 kilometers within Nairobi. That's
so basically we're saying like, yeah, okay, Hugo, daredevil. Anyways, Dorothy's just, yeah, go on. Dennis, how about you?
Yeah, I'll try and beat that one. I would say I'm adventurous. Because
can you catch like the competitive vibe from this group, by the way? Yeah. Sorry.
Adventurous because I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro actually last year, and yeah, pretty big achievement.
It sounds like it's made up, but it's not.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, over 15,000 feet. You know, I'm happy there are chairs today because my legs are still aching up until last year. But
how was the air up there?
Oh yeah, I'm still feeling it now. Like everything's still buzzing. But yeah, I'd say adventurous is my characteristic.
Amazing. What about you, Aram?
For me, I would say I'm a dreamer or like a Batman. You know, 15 years ago, 2009, I dreamt of a gaming industry, not just a game company, and here we are, assembled, Avengers assembled. So, yeah,
matching
I'll say
outfits.
that.
Yes. Okay, let's hop into it because, again, we don't have a lot of time. But, you know, you mentioned 2009, you imagined or envisioned this games industry. And I think for a lot of developers in the West, we're like, 2009, that's not like that long ago. A games industry already existed. But why is that different for the continent of Africa? We did a lot of myth-busting for Latin America. And maybe I'll go to you first, Hugo, because you also wrote a report about the African games industry. What are maybe some misconceptions about Africa and gaming in Africa that need to be busted?
Well, I don't know what busted, but...
Okay, we're not going to get them busted. I was hoping.
No, so I typically start with a slide called Africa is not a country, because I really want to like sort of like delve just a little bit into some basic misconceptions that people might have. So, you know, Africa is 55 countries, over 3,000 tribes, 2,000 languages, 30 million square kilometers, about 20% of the land's lived-in population, just to provide some context. Although all of that said, is predominantly split between English and Francophone speaking countries, but multiple dialects. But there are some other very important piece bits that I think loads of people in the West or outside of the continent do not realize. It's 7 hours from London or Paris, from Lagos, for instance, and we're pretty much in the same time zone as Europe. So working with Africa is pretty easy. So that's the starting point. But going back to the report, I've been in the industry since 2012, just a few years after ERM started. And what I realized is that over that period of time, we were evolving as an industry, but we were not necessarily articulating our journey. And we were not presenting our value proposition to the marketplace, both locally and internationally. So my team and I spent some time putting together the first very comprehensive Africa Games Industry Report, which really tries to, create a snapshot of what is going on in the space.
So what is going on in the space?
Well, we can start with player population growth as an example. Currently we have around 200 million players as an example. We're going to cross over $1 billion in revenue this year. It's predominantly mobile, as you would imagine. Android is the kind of predominant platform that people are playing on. And people are mostly playing a combination of casual, hybrid, and hyper-casual games. But we have a really large potential for growth because the overall population size is 1.4 billion. So we're looking at less than 20% of people playing today. And in 25 years from now, we're going to cross over to 2.5 billion. And we would continue to grow as a population. So I see huge potential for the future.
And when it comes to some of that potential, I mean, we talked about India just a minute ago and how the #1 title there actually came from India. And I'm wondering, within the continent of Africa, are there countries there as well where the #1 game also happens to be made in that country? Or is it different when it comes to Africa? Aram, I'll throw it to you.
Yes, I think Africa is not there yet. The #1 game is still not African yet, but very soon is going to be. And because we've seen Africans consume African content. We've seen the success of Nollywood. We've seen the success of the music industry, and it's growing very fast. And with this, gaming is the next frontier to present cultural elements for the next billion population, right? Africa has the youngest population. It has a very high growing middle class who can pay. So the content that we have, the rich African content, has to be preserved in video games. I knew about Thor, Odin, through video games, through Marvel Avengers, before even knowing about my cultural elements. And a lot of African parents are concerned about that. But there's a clear gap of skills, it's not there. But we studios here employ local talent, and we do that through our custom-created internship programs. We have boot camps. Recently, we started taking gaming electives in big universities in Ghana, in Africa, for instance. And our studios, I think Malio, Leti Arts, Isuku, Kiro, we have titles that people play. We have Swift, right, preserving African elements for a global audience. We have Africa's Legends. Malio did something with Disney recently with Rising Chef, right? We have Kiro games on Xbox with Orion, and so on and so forth. You can check us out. So the growing content is growing, and there's a huge population of African diaspora who are concerned about their kids knowing about their roots. So this is going to position them to definitely consume African content. So that is the huge potential that we see Africa consuming. So in the very next about 5 years, we should find a hit, like a first African country reporting Candy Crush as the last game being played, and probably Swift being the first game, from a country, So that is what we see.
That is the dream. Thief, still a dreamer, the dream. And you mentioned, you touched on that piece about talent just now. So I wanted to swing it over to Dorothy. you work on something called Game Up Africa, and your whole world is talent and trying to build up talent. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and also what it means to the rest of the ecosystem?
Yeah, there's something very interesting going on within the African region right now, in that the continent is positioned to be the only one in the world where the population is set to double by 2050, and this population is set to further double in 2100. And this presents two things. There's a lot more consumption of content within the region, and then there's the need to create more content for the region. And the studios know this, the people know this. So now the question becomes, who is creating this content? And the earlier founding studios, Aram started in 2009, Hugo started in 2012. They struggled a lot to find local talent within their regions to get into their studios. And this is where Game Up Africa comes in, because it makes more sense to have Africans creating content for Africa. Indians are creating content for India, so we can do the same. And so Game Up Africa is a talent development initiative that focuses on three things. So we do training, we do mentorship, and we do knowledge sharing to thousands of game programmers, artists, and sound engineers every year for 4 years. So there's thousands of people, now over 5,000, are getting fed into the local ecosystem. So when Hugo here wants to hire, or when Aram wants to hire, they don't go looking very far. They just look within their locality, because we train across the whole continent. Earlier on this year, Disney Games published a game together with Milio Games. And the interesting thing about this game is that 75% of the developers came from the Game Up Africa program.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're like, mic drop.
Yes,
we love Dorothy. No, I think it's amazing. And like you said, it speaks so much to this ecosystem that you're starting to build. So when it comes to that, like, yes, we have talent. Yes, we have these, cultural touch points. But also, there's much more of a community that's starting to be built on the continent. Like, I was at Africa Games Week last year, and I got to see it firsthand, just that like collaborative, yes, competitive, but also collaborative spirit coming together. So Dennis, I was hoping you could chat a bit more about that ecosystem when it comes to community that's really starting to build up.
Yeah, of course, and always competitive, as you say. But yeah, the ecosystem is definitely there, it's definitely growing. Africa Games Week, as you mentioned, which is also happening this November as well. We've also had Lagos Games Week in Nigeria, which has been massive for the continent. Earlier this year, we had Playing for the Planet as well, where we used gamification as a tool to tackle some of the world's bigger challenges. So that being happening in Africa just shows how much of the continent deserves the attention that it's being given. And these examples, also the global game jams, which I was lucky enough to participate in, where teams come together to collaborate and to create magnificent games based on specific themes. And these examples are just a reason why that Africa should be considered, and brings global audiences together to see that Africa should be considered as a huge market in the gaming industry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I loved it last year. So any of you, like you said, you wanted to travel, you all had your hands up to warmer places. So I'm calling you out for that. Please do, yeah, if you can, go visit Africa Games Week in Cape Town. It's a really, really great event, super cool community. And before we head off, because we're going to get the sign soon, again, can we chat a little bit about the future? So where do you see Africa sort of positioned within the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to the global games industry? And anyone can take it and jump in.
No, I can start. So I think it's not even going to take 10 years or 5 years. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a great transformation of Africa, kind of like transforming itself from a net consumer market to a net producer market. That energy is already happening today, and we're seeing more interest, more investment. Like as Dorothy alluded, we partnered with Disney earlier this year or last year, actually, and released the game earlier this year on a first Africa-focused IP, and the first kind of like collaboration with a big, like IP holder and an African game studio. And that is really catalyzing the industry. Like we have an extremely young population. That population is playing games and is hungry for the knowledge to make games. And we are solving that problem as well by creating, channels and pathways for people to learn this really desirable skill. like what will they produce? What will they create? What would they share with the global audience? And we also know that the global market is looking for kind of like fresh new ideas. And Africa has really strong stories to tell. And we also have, like new audiences who are going to discover games and help continue to grow this industry that we all love.
Anyone else want to jump in for final thoughts?
Yes, just to add to that, I think a lot of co-productions are going to happen because we are positioning our technical and creative studios and skill sets to provide that. I think about 3 years ago, we did some narrative consulting with Riot Games and also are doing co-productions with other studios in Netherlands and all that from the soil. Like all that is coming locally. And having universities now taking up game design, that is where the parents understand.
Aren't you also an instructor of game design?
Yes, and I'm now a lecturer of that game design.
He's
elective,
personally taking on the challenge.
And that is a story, to be a self-taught game designer and now becoming a lecturer in that, and recently just entered a PhD program in gamification. That is a career path that an African parent understands. So they can now push their kid to go do that. And the esports community is also growing very fast, right? So parents are now saying that, hey, games can have a career path. Very soon, they will be competing with African titles, not just the European titles. So I'm looking forward to see the first African hit game that is going to be played globally in Superfest, or
It's a great tee-up for this weekend.
Exactly. So that's what I see coming in, and there's so much potential. Just to end to that, at Leti Arts, for the past 2 months, we've had 90 applications of hungry local African talent who want to intern or work with us. It has never happened before. And we've taken 50 of them on internships. And we normally employ 20 to 30%, all self-funded. So we need partners to make this happen. And I'm sure Maliyo has the same story. Isuku has the same story. We are trying our best to start groups like IGDA being the African Game Development Group being there, and a professional group called PAG. That's a Pan-African gaming group that we started, which is still seeing how best to position itself to make co-productions happen on the continent. So yes, these are some of the things that will happen in the next 5 years.
I also think we are in the process of creating this self-sustaining value chain. And Hugo said we have a very rich culture that has yet to be tapped into fully. So what we're about to start seeing is this cultural practices and stories being put into game experiences that people can actually get to play and interact with. We're seeing a lot of that in the film industry, in the music industry, and we want to start doing that within the continent, creating games for Africans and for the world.
Very exciting. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and just to add on to what my colleagues have said, there's also a lot of enthusiasm in the continent, especially towards the young people. I think we're an example of that. You have Iram, you have Hugo, sort of the old guards, and Dorothy and I, the young ones. Who knows, in the next Games Fest, it'll be Dorothy and I who will be the old ones. And then we'll have some young ones, yeah.
Basically, Dennis is saying it's time for you guys to move over.
Time for them to go, yes, yeah. Exactly, and have some more enthusiastic, more young people, the next generation coming up.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah. So it speaks more to the enthusiasm that the young people have in the industry in Africa, and that's what's going to skyrocket it from here on out.
Oh, I think it's super exciting. And I know you touched on esports, and I just wanted to, like you mentioned, Superfest before. What does esports look like on the continent currently?
Yeah, it's growing very fast. So currently we have esports teams, and Leti Arts sponsors one called Play Province, and we also work with the Esports Association of Ghana. The government is understanding more and more of esports, which is trickling down to us, the developers, at some point. It might come. It has not happened yet. But we have pro teams who are playing Clash of Clans. Some are playing Valorant, FIFA, and they've been traveling globally. They were in Bali. They were in, I think they came to Romania. And now parents are now pushing their kids to go do esports. Like, they are like, oh, they are cheering them up. Can you imagine an African parent seeing the child play games and it's like, yeah, go for it, go for it. And I've started doing that as a parent myself. If my kid wants to spend time on Roblox, hopefully Swift or Africa's Legends soon, I tell him, if you don't get better, you are not playing the next day. So anytime he comes to me with a FIFA score, I'm like, are you playing world class or you are playing semi-pro? If it's a semi-pro, no FIFA for you tomorrow.
I feel like there's lots of similarities between Aram and Robbie. With
and I do
kids,
that. And my kids, I have 4 kids, adorable. They are all game junkies. And just to give them a shout, Lon Jose, Seyom, Setiam. These guys play games all the time, but they need to get better to have the next day. So that is it.
Okay, amazing. I think that is a really nice way to wrap it up. Like I said, super excited about everything that's happening in Africa. And I know that we've just scratched the surface, but please do seek all of these guys out and have further conversations with them. I know everyone has games with them as well. You can play their games, But yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.